Amber Rudd has said the Home Office doesn't yet know how many Windrush migrants were wrongly detained. She said she only realised there were systemic problems with Windrush migrants very recently and admits she should have spotted it sooner. Yeah, the Home Secretary. What kind of excuse is that? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not my fault. I didn't realise. It was happening.
Now. In the old days, the ministers used to fall on their
go.
sword. That never happens now. They always say, oh, no, I've got to stay in the job to sort it out. That's the new excuse of how you stay in.
She's been being grilled in the Home Affairs Select Committee all this afternoon. Oh. And one of the people dishing out that grilling was Labour MP Stephen Doughty. He joins me on the line now. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
What questions did you put to the Home Secretary?
Well, I was raising with her the issue that I think this goes well beyond just the Windrush generation. I mean, I've had cases myself. I've got a very diverse community in Cardiff Bay, people who came to work in our docks over many hundreds of years from all over the Empire and the Commonwealth. And obviously I've had Windrush cases, but I've actually seen the same things happening to people from many other countries as well. I've had British citizens wrongly deported. I've had people unable to get their documents and passports, people unable to go to family funerals. I mean, some really, really heart-rending cases. And I think there's a much bigger problem here at the Home Office than the Home Secretary was willing to admit today. She was giving all the apologies and the warm words about sorting out for the Windrush generation, but I think there are some big problems coming down the track.
And you think, I mean, their position seems to be, whoops, this was an error, we're embarrassed by it, but there was no intent. Are you suggesting that actually there was a policy unspoken or otherwise, and there was intent to simply drive people out willy-nilly from these shores?
Well, I was very clear to her that I think what's happened here is that when you introduce a policy like the hostile environment policy and then you cut resources in the department, as the Tories have repeatedly done, you reduce the discretion that staff can make on cases and you increase the pressure on them, you start making some serious errors, and not just for the Windrush generation who didn't have that documentation, but for many others. And what happens then is you get a complete blurring between British citizens, people who can be here legally and have the right to be here legally, and then people who are illegally here. And unfortunately, because of the policies they've followed, and let's not forget most of this was introduced under the now Prime Minister, Theresa May. I felt rather sorry actually for Amber Rudd at points today because she was having to clear up the mess that the Prime Minister has left for her. That is the result. You end up with people being treated completely inappropriately, people who've contributed to this country over decades.
There's a suggestion that the problem is here, the Home Office has targets for the removal of illegal immigrants, and that is why they're playing fast and loose with this stuff and shoving people out without a buy nor leave. Rudd's still denying that, isn't she, that the Home Office has targets?
It was quite extraordinary. We had a representative of Home Office staff appearing before the Home Secretary and a senior civil servant came in, who told us clearly that they did have net removal targets in each region of the UK. The Home Secretary then didn't appear to know whether they did have these removal targets. The senior civil servant denied that they had them, and outside, the same person who'd spoken to us was telling the media that they do have them. And
if they do have them, what's so wrong about that? If they're saying the target's to remove illegal immigrants, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, removing people who are not here legally, of course, absolutely. And I believe in a fair and appropriate immigration system, and people who've come in here illegally should be removed, and people who've committed crimes and breached the terms of their residency or whatever that might be. But the reality is that when you introduce, as was repeatedly warned, let's not forget this, repeatedly warned, including by our own committee, a system where you are cutting back the number of staff looking at these things, putting additional pressures on them, introducing all these additional requirements, you're going to catch far too many people in that net rather than the people who are here illegally. And as a result, we're seeing British people being deported. We're seeing people who've been here legally from the Windrush generation being detained. I spoke to them outside, some of them who'd come to hear the hearing afterwards, and treated like second-class or third-class.
Do you think it's subconscious?
citizens.
Do you think it's racist subconsciously? They're black, so they're treated worse.
I always like to be very, very, very careful about making allegations like that, because I think on an individual basis, some Home Office civil servants have some very difficult decisions to make, and they are trying to balance off the security needs and the law against the individual cases. But when you have a system that is brought about this way, you can unfortunately become unconsciously institutionally racist, because of course it targets people from certain communities, whether that's the Caribbean community, whether that's Africans, whether that's people from the subcontinent. And as I said, I've had people in Cardiff, from Somaliland, Yemen, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, the Caribbean, Africa for hundreds of years, and yet they get themselves caught up in these situations often because they can't prove to the nth degree documents that they were here rightly all along, even when they've been paying tax for 30 or 40 years.
It's easy to speak to someone, isn't it, on a one-to-one basis and find out whether they're lying or not.
Well, exactly, and that's what they don't do, and that's the crazy situation. The Home Secretary admitted today that she wants to change things. She wants to see a more personal approach introduced. Well, you can't do that on the cheap, and the reality is now is that they've made so many cutbacks. She said she's going to introduce 50 additional staff to deal with these cases and 30 people in a call centre. Well, I'm sorry, that's going to scratch the tip of an iceberg. I mean, I raised the case of a man living in the neighbouring community to mine in South Wales who was born. His parents were serving in the RAF in Germany, and because they won't accept his birth certificate, he's now denied a passport and can't travel to go on holiday with his family. I mean, what an absurd situation!
Well, and his parents were British.
Very quickly, yeah, they were British. They were serving with the RAF in Germany, and he's now being denied and saying he can't prove that he's British.
The thing is, you keep thinking of the immense stress. We all get stressed every day when little obstacles appear in your life. You get an unexpected bill, or your kid doesn't get to school you wanted, or your car has an unexpected thing. These are enormous life-changing traumas that so many people have gone through, and it's the responsibility of our own government. It's like someone needs to go, don't they? I mean, are you calling? Do you think you will call for Amber Rudd, perhaps even Theresa May, who presided over this, to resign?
Well, I'm certainly clear that all the steps here lead to the Prime Minister, because fundamentally she was one of the longest serving.
So the Prime Minister needs to resign.
Well, I think she needs to look very, very carefully at what responsibility she had in this situation. But as I said, I think this is a combination of a series of decisions, maybe actually by a series of immigration ministers as well. Let's not forget. Often, while the Home Secretary has responsibility for the whole department, often it's immigration ministers taking.
But you're saying all roads lead to Theresa May, and this is a pretty major national scandal. So when you say she needs to think very carefully about her role, what are you saying? You're saying if she accepts responsibility in large part for this, then she needs to step down.
Well, I think she needs to look very carefully at her role in this. What she's done the last few days is she's gone kind of into hiding. She initially wouldn't meet the Caribbean leaders, then she did. She made an apology, and now she's gone off in hiding and left Amber Rudd, who bears a significant responsibility as well, and her ministers for the last few years for not picking up on this, and they admitted that today, and she was quite contrite in apologising for failing to spot the systematic problem that there was here, but she's been thrown up as kind of chaff for the Prime Minister, who fundamentally is the one here who needs to be answering the serious questions. But as I said, this is what happens when you slash at a department, when you introduce targets, when you put pressure on the poor individuals having to look at these decisions, and you introduce this sort of hostile, assume everybody's lying policy, which of course ends up with you making some terrible decisions, which, as you say, affect people's lives. Let's not forget, it's an individual was being reported who, was going for his prostate cancer treatment and being told he was going to have to pay for it.
There was a guy that died, didn't they? He got sacked. Yeah.
People wrongfully deported. People who've gone into real issues with their jobs. Because of course, quite understandably, some employers now go, "Oh, I don't want anything that's a bit complicated, where you have to do all these checks." People are unable to get houses. We heard of people who have been made homeless as a result, and these are people who've contributed to our country for decades, have the legal right to be here. It's a disgrace.